We are live.
We are live. Live.
Hey, Andy.
Hey, Bambos.
So we have a very special guest,
Special.
and you're saying that because you know what to say.
No, I do know what to say. I love this woman. Are you kidding me?
You wrote a whole...
I wrote a whole article about her.
Yeah. And we got to spend a week with her in Spain on our trip together.
Yes. And so we have on the show Jules Toro, who has lived 30 years off the grid on
A Wonderful Chaos.
Hello, Bambos.
Hello, Andy.
I've never seen us so big on the screen like this before. I don't know what we've done.
I've enhanced the screen.
Wow.
We look good, huh?
You might see we have a teepee behind us today. This is a teepee on our green screen. And that is because Jules Toro is our guest. And Jules Toro is an amazing woman with an amazing story.
Yeah. She's been actually her whole life almost since her 20s.
Yeah, since
early
her
20s. She's been living off grid.
Yeah. But I mean, beyond off grid, that's like the light version. This woman at 20 had a baby, said, you know what? I'm making a lot of money in London and I hate it. So I'm going to take my baby, go to Somerset and actually become an anarchist. I'm going to stand in front of trucks that are trying to build pavement for streets. And what am I going to do?
I'm going to tie myself to the tree.
I'm going to tie myself to the tree with my baby in my hands and say, you're not building another road here. Like that's just fascinating as hell.
Yeah.
So she does that at 20 and she then says, I am going to travel Europe to find whatever I'm going to find, every alternative community in Europe. That's what she says. Like, can you imagine? Every community in Europe, I'm going to check it out and see which one is my heart going to be following. And so basically, we got to spend a week with her. We got to discuss everything that came up while living in community, right? And when we say community, this is really community. This isn't like, let's build 4 houses together. She had a teepee.
Yeah.
So she lived in a teepee. That's why we have our teepee there. And I'm just going to do the other closer to you, bring you on our screen. So she lived in a teepee. So think about that. I mean, gas, water, electricity,
basics,
gone. I've got a baby, 2 kids that I'm raising in a teepee with like a bassinet to make sure that they're clean every so often.
And she was the happiest person.
The happiest.
Yeah.
When you talk to her about those days, it's like her eyes light up, like she's like talking about like the wonder and joy of that life.
Yeah.
So I thought, how cool is it to bring her on and just to talk to her? We already talked to her. I mean, I was so fascinated with her story that I wrote an article which will be on Buzzworthy, guaranteed of that. It took longer than I'd hoped, but it will be on Buzzworthy, I think, in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
great.
We'll put, when that article goes up, of course, we'll have this video on that article. So this will be the complement to that. And without further ado, let's welcome her on. Jules Toro.
Da, 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 da.
Da, 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 da. In those leopard skin jeans or tights. I love them.
Where's the tippy? I don't see the tippy.
It's beautiful.
Hey, Julia.
Julia, who's next to you?
This is Puss Puss.
Puss Puss. I love it. It's a camera hog. Look at that. Look at the camera hog there. Let's do the interview with her. Puss Puss, how are you today? I love it. So, thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
You kidding me? You were fascinatingly, when I said I wanted to have you on, you were saying like, Andy, who would be interested in this story? And I think to myself, who wouldn't be interested in this story? You. 30 years living without like a direct connection to an electrical outlet. You know, you used electricity, obviously, but you basically figured out how to live off the grid for that many years.
Yeah. And you know what I found in that time?
What's that?
It's like the simplicity and the way of life, and to be living with so much less stress that's I don't know, that's the, I think that's the key. That's when you see these photos of people in third world countries, and they're smiling all over their faces.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Well, help us, like, take us back to the time before then. So, like, let's sketch a picture. You're 20 years old. I guess you're working as a saleswoman in London.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of you. You were hot as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, you still are, obviously, but I'm saying back then, I'm like looking at these pictures, like you could have sold, ice to Eskimo kind of thing.
Working in the city, and I was working in the times where they were the King's Cross bombings as well. So there was all that stress on top of me, and every week having to visit certain companies to do the sales, and it also being the woman in the office was tricky. There was a lot of no, at the time that was quite normal to have sexual harassment, and so you have this job, and you make the sales, but a lot of the time people are wasting your time just to spend time with you.
Yeah.
And so when I got pregnant with my first child, I knew that I didn't want to bring him up in London, and I knew I wanted to bring him up in the nature. And that was when I retired he's 26 now, and I retired as I worked until a week before I gave birth, and that was the last time I worked for anyone else.
Amazing. And you were 20 years old then?
25.
Oh, 25.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're pregnant, you quit, and you just did this on the map and you just took off, or you actually knew a little bit where you would go to? Because back then we didn't have Wi-Fi, we didn't have internet, right?
I had no idea where I was going, because living in London, I didn't have access to ideas of communities. And I think that sometimes when you put out a vision of what you want, it kind of starts to first of all, I read a book, and it was about an alternative community. And I remember a man saying to me, "So what would you really want for your life now?" And I kind of drew out this picture of what I'd want. And he said, "You're just living in Cloud Cuckoo Land. That place doesn't exist." And I always wanted to say I found that place, because I didn't really find that place exactly, but definitely a far cry from my life in London. And
this speaks to something really beautiful, what you said. It's actually a talk that I had this morning, and often is that when you have a vision of what you want for your life, how you want to live, where you want to go, in a weird way, everyone around you that can't expand their vision beyond whatever they see or understand will tell you that that's impossible.
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
You need this, this, and this.
Yeah. And it's like it's almost like it's this way of holding everyone else back, because you yourself aren't necessarily living your full dream. So in that way, let's say if what you said was true, that guy would have to reevaluate his life. Right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, you just proved yourself right by saying, "I know it exists, and I'll find it just because I won't settle." Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I remember that I met him sometime afterwards, because that was also this longing to meet him again and say, "Hey, I found it." And he'd also found a community in Tobago. So that was So he'd actually gone back to his original place of birth, and he'd found a community there. So it was funny. So I was just like, I found it. But you said it. You said you never would. Yeah. I never would, but I did.
Yeah,
Julian. But back then we didn't have internet. So how the hell did you end up in Spain of all places, and then actually find a community in the middle of nowhere? Because I imagine they're remote. It's not like there's an address. Like how do you do that?
That's the funny. So that's the funny thing. It was like So first of all, I was living on the road protest campaign with my baby. And
In London.
yeah, I wasn't actually tying myself to trees. Other people were, but I was being very active
Well, let's
and
get it
more active
clear.
than a mother
You were
should be.
thrown in the paddy wagon, arrested,
Yes,
and the
yeah, I
baby was
was.
taken away. So
Yeah,
however
because
that happens, that's just crazy. Anyways.
I didn't realize what the place. I didn't really understand non-violent protest at the time.
Mm.
We had a saying, keep it fluffy, and you just had to be a presence, especially if you were a mother with a baby. That's just enough, just to be standing there, smiling. And I was breastfeeding my son in the park, and they said move, and I didn't want to move. I wanted to finish feeding, and that's when I got thrown in the wagon, and that was when I had other mothers really saying, now your place in this protest is just to be there, and that's enough. You don't have to be standing in the way of anything.
Yeah.
And you don't, and the fact that you got taken away upset a lot of people today, and you didn't help. So it was a good lesson for me. It was a really good lesson for me to realize that I didn't have to be actively protesting, just standing there as a presence.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
But where were we?
I can continue. You have so we're kind of creating a bit of a timeline here. We have this young, successful professional person in London says, yes. Now we move in forward. You have a baby, and then 6 months.
How did I find the community?
And then you get to the point where you go to Somerset, right? Where you say you had your first run-in with the law, right? The peaceful protest discoveries. And now the question is, now you're finishing all of that. Now, where does it come into your consciousness that, oh, I want a community and I'm going to go to this place? So how do you find that?
Well, so there were a lot of other protesters, and it was about gathering information from them, where they'd been traveling, so we had a book. So me and my business partner, Rupert, we had a book, and we'd write down the details on the different communities around Europe. And I don't even know if the community in the valley was even in the book, because we started to travel around in a car, and then we'd stop and we'd get out and stay in a cave, and it wouldn't be a cave house, just a cave, and we'd bring out our futon, and we'd make our bed in there, and we'd have our little gas cooker. We'd make a fire, and we'd cook food, and then go to the next place. And then we came across we picked up a hitcher, and we came across a rainbow gathering. And at that rainbow gathering, they mentioned this community. And really, for us, traveling in a car with a baby, it was a godsend, just to relax and just to find other people. So, because our intense little family unit needed some community, and we needed to get out the car and rest. So we arrived in a community that was a spiritual community, and they would eat twice a day together, and they would have a sweat lodge twice a month together, have a women's circle once a month or twice a month at the time. And mostly it would just be chanting all day, smoking bongs, and making dinner and breakfast. And that was it. And that
was 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, that would be far more normal. But 30 years ago, if you were to discuss this, people think, wow, they've lost it. Like now this is more common. But
this is common.
This is like 30 years ago, everyone would have been judging that as like off, like really, really off.
So it was far out. We were all naked. It was basic. So we didn't have phones. We didn't cook on anything but fire, and it was pretty basic. So a magic hat used to go around every day and collect what money people had, And so some people had no money at all, and some people knew they had money and had to put more in for the rest of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I wasn't happy because there wasn't any gardening happening. So my vision really was it was a sustainable community where we were more alternative, and this was more of a healing community. This was like the first step. It was like unwind, chant, sweat, share, and it had its purpose. But most of the years that I was there, I was always, I want to find something else. I want to find something, where we'd gather and dry chestnuts, and we'd weave our own, fabric for our own clothes. That's how radical I was feeling at the time.
And is that the community? How long did you spend in that community that did the sweat lodges and the woman circle and all of this? How long was that?
7 years.
In that time, did you live in a teepee? Was that a teepee?
I lived in a teepee.
And was that a teepee
I lived in
you
a
built
teepee.
yourself?
Yeah, we sewed it ourselves on one of those old-fashioned non-electrical sewing machines.
Where you use the pedal on your foot?
Yeah. No, for example, for washing, which we do every day, is we would jump into the cold pools, which were fed by springs, or if we were lucky and the waterfall was running, then we'd get under the waterfall. But it would be a day, at least once a day.
Wow.
I'm assuming waterfalls is when it was raining, the day after.
Yeah.
How did you manage to sustain yourself for 7 years in a community? Like, did you or Rupert go out to work, or did you have savings? Like, how did you guys manage that?
I had savings. Rupert had savings, but we also made money in that time. So we'd have ways of making money. For example, Rupert was selling leather work that he'd crafted himself, and he also made bread, which is quite a funny memory to think about him making bread. And there were festivals as well, so we used to go to festivals and make money.
Oh, fantastic. So basically you just learned how to create and then just monetized it in different ways.
Yeah, and we had a garden that we could bring everything that we needed to eat from that garden, apart from the Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I used to feel really good if we were eating a whole meal from the garden and nothing added. That you could have eggs from your chickens, you'd have broad beans and potatoes and greens and carrots, and that would be enough for the day. So what more do you need? And all, we were crocheting our own clothes,
That's fantastic. I mean, if you think about what everyone's talking about today, right, with COVID and redefining the future of society and how we're going to live, work, and consume, basically you're living the life that everyone is sort of aspiring to say this is the future.
I mean, we were doing a lot of healing, so it wasn't all just peace and love, but nevertheless, some of the memories that I have around that time of like washing our clothes together, sitting, squatting in front of buckets with cold water, just washing and singing at the same time. Like, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Compared with being in a house on your own, bringing up a baby, that it doesn't compare. And then we'd have this sarong that we'd tie in between the trees, and I made it for putting my newborn baby in, and everyone else was using the same. As he woke up, someone else would plop their baby in, and it was beautiful just to be in this situation. And people always thought, oh, my baby's a no nappy baby. Our babies had no nappies because because it's hot here, and we didn't have anyone looking at us thinking, oh, that's disgusting. So it was an amazing natural way to be.
Yeah, it sounds that way.
And when I traveled recently, I went to where was it, Laos, and I saw the kids playing free without their parents on their cases, telling them what to do and how wild they were. I thought, wow, this is how we brought up our kids as well, the natural way, that they could be free and learn their own lessons.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they're grateful for that.
Yeah, when you speak about that, and I think about, my brain can't even fathom how that life would look like, right? Because you're saying in some ways that like all of the constructs that society would do in trying to indoctrinate you in a certain way, right? We say you go to school when you're this age, you do this, you prepare to work, you go to high school, you're kind of almost saying, guys, you we're going to figure it out as you emerge and grow and learn. In some ways, I see education today leaning more in your direction, right? The industrial revolution is over. Now we're looking at where are we going from there. In some ways, you allowed your kids to evolve as they desired and wished. Would you say, to someone listening, thinking, oh my God, if my kid doesn't go to school, they won't be able to function in society. Would you say your kids have learned how to function in society?
Yeah. And one of the things that was brilliant about bringing your kids up in community is they learn to communicate with adults in a natural way. They don't have that thing where where they're scared of adults because adults represent authority, and so therefore they learn to lie and they don't share. And so when they then go into work or into college interviews, they can connect in a way with the interviewer, which really impresses. So a lot of the children that came from here and that were home educated, they could walk straight into their A levels at college because of how well they were with communication and how confident they were.
Yeah, because I have had contact with at least your one child, and when we spoke, it was certainly very much like talking to an adult my same age, right? I wasn't feeling like I was talking to a kid. Yeah.
When you say healing, like when people are there in a community and they're healing, were there any situations which were like to the edge of being a danger to the rest of the community? If you know what I mean?
Very much so. Yeah, there were some terrible situations. Yeah, there's going to be.
Smile.
we have some friends that are writing books now, and because the stories around the community, and they're crazy, and I'm not going to talk about it, even though I know that would make a really interesting interview. I think I'm not going to talk about them in the interview because, well, you can just imagine. Well, I'll just say, so in a community normally, because there's no real walls, and such a lot of kind people, it does attract people with mental health issues that are even more severe than the ones that we have. so especially if they have children, it's very safe for them to be in a community surrounded by caring adults. So there were cases like that, families that really weren't fit to be parents, in my opinion, that the children were raised by the community.
Wonderful.
And you would say those were the not adjusted parents, the ones that were, say, maybe mentally not able to raise the children. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
So the community kind of supported those, which is really beautiful.
They were not excommunicated or shut away. You can't be with us. They're supported.
They were supported in the community. Yeah. I think this is really important, that in community that we understand mental health issues and we have compassion for it.
What's the border of that, right? Like what's the point where you say, okay, like we can't tolerate that? What's that?
When someone needs medication, they need to have that amount of help that someone is brought in to help them get medicated.
Yep.
And the border of needing medication would be that person is a threat to themselves or other people.
Okay.
Wow.
But if someone's just a naked hippie that's just dancing around spouting poetry, naming no names, then that person's just fine. They're not doing any harm. so they can just.
Yeah, exactly. Society, if that person was in Amsterdam, I mean, Amsterdam is already pretty tolerant, of course, but like
Yeah,
then their ability for that person to stay in society without the cops being called isn't going to be very long.
yeah.
And you're saying in your community, it's like, hey, that's just Jim doing his thing. Like, get over it.
It's all love and joy.
Just doing it, just doing his thing. I mean, we had people that fasted on just water for 40 days.
Oh God,
Wow.
Yeah,
I can
and
imagine.
turned into skeletons doing it. And there was a fine line between saying, hey, like, you know, is this really okay what you're doing, or are you doing, you are free to do what you want with this body that you've been given in this, um, you know, here.
And when their choice to go do a water fast for 40 days, was that tied to a movement, or was that just like, what was the inspiration behind doing something so drastic?
Probably Jesus.
Jesus. Wow.
You know how many people get a Jesus complex when they smoke a lot of weed?
No, I don't, but nice to know. Julia, what were like living off like in that environment, yeah, before you went to where you are now? What were some of the concerns like you would say, oh, there were these moments that we would encounter a few times a year where I wouldn't be able to sleep or it would keep us busy. Like what were the concerns? Like here, for example, it's more like can I pay the bills? Am I going to get a job? What were your day-to-day concerns?
Oh, let me think.
Hmm.
The concerns: staying warm,
Mm,
staying
basic.
stay, staying warm, and also if one of us should get sick, there's quite like a lot of like looking after the person that's sick. So just taking care of each other. But I think the biggest, I mean, the concerns of the day would be just the same old, make sure you've got water, make sure you've got wood for the fire, make sure you've got
Mm.
food, and make sure you've got clean clothes and clean
Mm.
clothes for your children, and make sure that they're clean.
Wow.
That's it.
You know, just by the way, that was incredibly. When you asked that question, my mind raced with, "Wow, what?" Because if you look at someone living in a city, or it's in that someone that's on the grid in the system, like their fear goes to, like Bambos indicated, do I have enough money to pay the rent? What happens if I get fired? You know, like those fears are those existential fears, assuming that the way they're living has to be continued, right?
Yeah.
And you're now laughing. I'm thinking about, yeah, you're like, yeah, I'm just worried. Am I going to be warm? What's the weather tomorrow? Do I need to, do I have enough? Do I have a blanket or something to keep us warm enough? Is there enough wood to make a fire tomorrow? There's a beauty in that, and if you think of it, take that in, it's like, wow.
Yeah, it's completely, I think for some people it's like, what?
Yeah, you're totally grounded.
And also there would be like staying in touch with your family back home, my mother and my father. So that would mean me going into town without a car, getting into town and going in, and making a phone call.
Like the ones where you dial.
Yeah. or writing a letter. So that would be a big concern for me. And honestly, it was one of my biggest stresses. Have I contacted my parents this month?
Wow.
And it wouldn't be that, it would only be once a month.
And obviously they would write back to you. They knew how to find you.
Yeah, they'd write back.
Wow.
And they came to visit once. That was
yeah, I have pictures of that day. I have pictures of that day because I helped write the article for Buzzworthy. So I had your dad there, and I just thought how fascinating it is, because what I saw was I had a picture of you on the sofa at Christmas with your family before you left to do this big adventure. And you were wearing the proper clothes. You had the short haircut, like you were the proper. So I have that 2000 or that 24-year-old version. And then I got the next picture of your dad visiting. I don't know what the time was between those two moments, but you've then hair is grown. You got the hippie clothes going. I mean, I thought it was fantastic. It was really fun to see.
Did you put them together?
Yes, I did actually. In the article, I actually have those two that I sent to you to look at.
Well, my parents visited at the same time, and they came down to share food, where we share food in a circle, and we'd all sit around. And I don't know, but a lot of people don't like being forced into doing anything that they don't want to do. So even though my parents were there, they didn't feel to wear any clothes, which I felt kind of embarrassed about. But at the same time, I was like, I respect your freedom. You know, you don't have to wear clothes just because my parents were there. And then there was the doing 3 ohms before we ate. My parents had never seen anything like it. We would all hold hands and sing a song, and then we do 3 ohms. And my mum laughs about that to this day. And they couldn't sit down on the carpet, so we actually had to get deck chairs for them. So they were sitting in these chairs with everyone else sitting on the ground, and then because the people just wanted freedom, they passed around this bong round, and I had to pass it, and my parents had to pass it as well. So there's this coconut bong with a bamboo, and because it gets passed around the circle, my parents had to keep on passing this bong, and it was just like, oh God, really?
I love it. Did they take a hit from the bong?
No.
Of course not. It would have been one of the first things she would have been.
And I didn't quite get that. There were naked people sitting in the circle with your parents there.
Yeah.
Who were, I'm assuming, highly conservative, concerned that our daughter is like in a bad state and dangerous situation with 2 kids.
Yeah, I don't know if they didn't have anything to say about that I'm in a bad state, because I don't think they wanted to rock the boat like that. They're so sweet.
Yeah.
But they were definitely outside their comfort zone.
But the fact that they were there,
their comfort zone, and they did that for me. That's so sweet.
I was going to say, how beautiful is that?
Yeah.
That is that's beautiful, because, you know, we don't need the parents to validate what we're doing, but at least to be part of it and not force us to exclude them, because like, that's all I asked of my dad, for instance, and he didn't necessarily, he wasn't able to be there for me if it wasn't the way he needed it to be. So in that sense, you're quite lucky to have that. It's beautiful.
They didn't come back.
And that's okay.
They didn't. I would have loved to have been a fly in the car driving back to England from that trip.
Yeah. Oh, my poor parents. I put them through a lot.
Oh, yeah, you must have.
What kind of healing did you have to work through? What kind of traumas?
Everything. It's the same old stuff still. The original abandonment word.
Mm-hmm.
No, but anger as well. How to express anger. And there was, gosh, really everything, the same as everyone else. Really, we're all on the same journey with that. But one of the most interesting. So we all used to pass around books, and I remember one book really hit me, and it was the Celestine Prophecy. I think I read that book when I first arrived in the village or the community, and I was looking at the control dramas there, and that was a real one for me. Of we can easily get into a poor me role, when you're really surviving, because sometimes there was a bit of survival, and that really woke me up to go, oh wow, look at that. That's something I'm playing out. And then we got into the Conversations with God books together, and those went around about creating your reality from your visions and your thoughts, and I went crazy with that. I just read all of them as fast as possible.
Wow.
And simplistic, but nevertheless, the way that life unfolds for me.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I can't dismiss that as truth.
You've surrendered a lot. When we talk about your journey and how you see it unfold, it's like you've just committed to the intention of either where you are right now, the what's the name again of the location? The
Hidden.
Hidden
Yeah,
Paradise.
Buharas.
The Apahadas, but the Hidden Paradise,
Yes.
which for those not for just those who don't know it, that you have actually incredible facility that you're running now, where people come in and do activities, and it's just really a beautiful place. So, Hidden Paradise in the Apahadas, it's got a Facebook page as
Hosts
well.
a lot of retreats. So that's how I met her.
Yeah, it's really great. I wanted to go to your question and follow up on that. So you're in community, right? And these are like the stickier questions, because I know that some of them might be hard to answer because there's other people involved, but I don't ask to make it complicated. I'm just curious in the dynamic.
Yeah.
When Bambo said anger, right? So I always find interesting in my own life is that if I see individuals as chemical compounds that I'm all pouring into a jar, then I know certain compounds will create explosions.
Yes.
Right. And of course, the jar is sort of the container, right? It's the container of what is or isn't acceptable in that group. So now if I take the jar as the community, which you were part of, and I think now I add one individual in that who's really just an angry person by nature. Yeah. And we go back to the principle where you said basically we accept everybody. Now, how does the community navigate that one angry person when someone like you, for instance, might say, you know what, I just don't like anger, and I don't think so how do we navigate that in the community in which you were part of?
That's a great question, Andy.
Thank you. As my nose drips
from basically didn't do it that well.
So don't follow us.
We didn't have the tools. We didn't have the tools.
Okay.
So there was actually a lot of shouting and disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't. We basically didn't have the tools to really listen to each other and empathize back then.
So it wasn't like, when I hear you say that, I feel shut down.
There was no facilitation tools in there. It was like, you jerk, you that, and then all of a sudden.
Because like you say, there's dynamics that bring up woundings and trigger, and of course that there is that, and I was very lucky that there wasn't so much of that, but there was. Yeah, in the end, I found that the disagreements that I had, it was that had to bring more and more compassion, was something that I found came naturally to me after some time, that we're just us humans, we're just floundering around with the best that we've got, the experiences that we've been that we've had, so we just do the best we can, don't we? So when someone comes at you with a whole load of anger, it's not really about like coming from this superior place of, I feel, and no, it's a bit like, okay, this person feels really threatened right now, and I actually, I'm not enjoying it when people come from a superior place, because they are lucky to have the language, and they're lucky that they've had the circumstances to be able to navigate through these waters. So it's I come from a very humble space with it. People.
This is a beautiful, it's a little bit of a tangent to where we were, but it is really beautiful what you're saying. And I found the longer I've done my training and coaching in businesses, especially, and there's times when there's a dysfunctional dynamic, and then actually introducing tools allows that dynamic to extend itself for a very long time, where it's a coping mechanism as opposed to fundamentally shifting the dynamic between individuals.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I've been laughingly, like when people ask me for the help, I would oftentimes in my later years default more to, guys, fight it out. Like let them know what you're really feeling. Like if someone's hiding the real feeling, then what I tend to see happens is the person hears what they're not saying, right? The judgment or the withhold of the judgment. And then they never feel trust, because they say, well, I didn't really get to hear your full truth because you sort of couched it in these weird words that you learned in a in a course or something.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. That's my feeling on it as well, Andy. There's a lot of can we say bullshit? We can't we? There's a lot of bullshit
Mm-hmm.
surrounding that and a lot of superiority. And I'd
Yep.
say that yeah.
So in that sense, and like I kind of like this, and I'm fascinated, and I'm like sort of vibrating a little bit when I think about it. Like you're gonna say, Andy, everyone in the community gets to show up as their true self, and everyone else gets to show up as their true self, and whoever can't deal with it has to deal with it. Like you don't have the choice not to deal with it because the community has to sort itself out. That's how you guys approached it, at least.
Yeah, you have to sort it out in the end. And you know, with friends and the natural way of being, you know, moving between the two, and it usually sorts itself out.
Yeah,
Usually. I love that.
And if not, someone moves on, I guess. How does it get resolved?
Someone moves on.
Someone moves on. You once told me, do you have something I was going to ask?
Well, no, go for it. I'll ask after.
When we were together, you mentioned something to me that I found really fascinating, and I wrote about it in the article, was that you said, Andy, when things couldn't be decided, there was a group of elders who were basically just the oldest people in the community.
Yeah.
And in some way, you know, they got just because of their age, not because of their insider wisdom, just because of their age, they got to make decisions that maybe that others couldn't resolve on the group. And I found that really fascinating because in some ways it goes back to another way of living, very much in what I would call the Eastern philosophy, right? Where we hold older in reverence, and we sort of allow them to dictate more than whatever the young bucks. So in your world and your experience, how was it to live that way?
We had some very wise elders around us.
Mm-hmm.
And even to this day, I remember some of the things that this woman, I mean, she probably wasn't much older than I am now, to be honest. But back then, you know, in my 20s, she appeared old.
Yeah.
And she'd say things like, she'd drop her salt all over her dinner, and then she'd say, "Oh dear, that must mean that I needed salt today." She'd say things like this, and she'd drop like little pearls of wisdom all over the place, and you know, she'd say, if you say you were worried about anything, she'd say, "Oh, worrying is the worst thing you can do for anyone, worrying about them." And you know, I can't remember all of them, but it was just sweet. And she just was a sweet elder. And I think that they used to make the decisions for us, and we respected them. We just respected them. And there was her partner had this beard about you know, super long like this, and he didn't really say, he didn't have to say much, but when he said something, we also listened. He'd have things to say sometimes. They were a great couple. They weave the teepee rope, the rope that keeps your teepee down in the wind, out of their own hair.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
That is really wild.
So this elder woman, and in those days, women were not considered as, I mean, you had the status back then, right? But in this community, that status...
Yeah, how was the status between men and women at that time? Because if you look at society in general, you've got the disparity. The same thing you spoke in London. Like, you're a beautiful woman, you go to an interview, and then people are abusive to you, just absorbing your time so they can spend time. How did you experience that differently in the community?
I just completely forgot about... I didn't even have a mirror for years.
So you didn't know what you looked like?
I didn't even think about it. I was just naked, and I didn't. And also, while I was in the relationship with Rupert, I didn't even see other men. Somehow, I didn't even consider it. I remember I used to have this the top that I used to wear in the winter. I just cut out like here and here, put zips on it so that I could breastfeed really easily. And I just did not even bother to do up the zips. And years later, my friends, friends that are men, spoke about this top that I used to wear and said, "Oh my God, and you used to wear this top." It didn't even occur to me because I didn't even have a mirror. So it was just that, just bringing up the kids and
But you also, I feel like, and this is, I believe this is where you were heading. At least I was fascinated through your question. Was it like an egalitarian sort of environment? Did you feel like women are treated the same as men, or did you feel like no, we're diminished in a way here just because of societal? Like, how was that for you in that?
Okay, there's a certain type of woman that wants to live a lifestyle like that.
Okay.
Not many. You don't get many princesses. So basically, you did as much as you could, and some women did too much, like carrying too much loads of things, especially if they were single mothers. But there was definitely kind of like this not too much divide between the male and females, but then also their roles really I really fell into a female role, and Rupert really fell into a male role bringing up the children, because sometimes that was just easier in some ways, because I naturally wanted the place a lot cleaner than him. and naturally, yeah, I just naturally had more of that nurturing role, and him providing.
Yeah. And I guess,
and I saw that reflected in a lot of other couples, but we were radical as well. So some were doing it exactly the opposite way round as well.
Yeah,
really
So
busting all the female and male roles.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
So in these communities, I hear that you and Rupert were in a kind of monogamous relationship, or like the word polyamory comes a lot up in these times. How was that back then?
You know what? I don't think there was any polyamory going on in our community that I knew about.
Yeah.
I mean, I was ridiculously monogamous. I just wouldn't even know about. I wouldn't have even known about it. But I don't think there really wasn't any. There really wasn't. I think that's more of a
and open, and it's all love.
Yeah, it wasn't that. So yeah, it's interesting.
Like the hippie times.
Yeah, the hippie times, because in some ways when you talk and I hear you speak, it's like, wow, it sounds like a hippie community. And then there's obviously assumptions made about those type of communities, like, oh, they're totally free sexually, they're always doing drugs. There's, and in some ways it sounds like there was a balance in your own life between we're going to live free and comfortable off the grid, and we have certain traditions we are keeping alive because that's what we feel like, and no one's imposing that on us, right? Because if you were in a sect, they'd say Osho, that free love was part of that whole movement in some ways, right? So it sounds like you guys got to decide your own community. You didn't have anyone imposing too much on you from the outside.
I think these were ideas that came in later, because actually, as you're speaking, I'm sort of remembering hearing about it for the first time. It's almost like I hadn't even thought of it as a possibility. Open relationships and things, they hadn't even occurred to me, because I hadn't, I'd grown up in a way where my parents weren't from the hippie generation of the 60s and swapping keys and things. So I didn't really know about those kind of things. People had affairs, and they were people lied, but people didn't say, hey, I'm in an open relationship. And then as I'd hear more about that, I thought, oh, this is it. This is intriguing. This is interesting. I definitely opened my ears to it. Like, oh, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
We have just a little bit over 10 minutes, and I kind of want to go on the journey a little bit towards the hidden paradise. Like, how did that evolve? Unless you have anything else, Andy.
No, love it. So hidden paradise.
Hidden paradise.
We contextualize that a little bit.
Yeah.
So not all that far away from this community that you were living in for how many years was that altogether?
7.
7 years altogether. Then there's this plot of land almost like 200 meters up the hill, and you said, "Wow, that's where we're gonna stake our claim and kind of begin to create maybe not our own community, but our own way of living." So how did that whole thing emerge, and where is it today? Yeah.
I mean, you bought the land, right?
Bought the land slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I bought that. I bought the first piece of land for really very very small amount of money. In fact, I might as well just say, because I think it's so surprising, that it was about the equivalent of about £7,000, and it
Wow.
had a spring and trees already planted, walnut trees, and beautiful, really beautiful.
Mhm.
And that's what when we moved up, we were still cooking on a fire and living in a yurt. And it was soon after that that we realized that the weather was more severe. Just this little further up, the wind used to hit us so much that the yurt would actually blow and rip in the wind.
Wow.
So I started to build a little cob house out of earth and straw as the first move towards having something more permanent. And we naturally started to create more space for ourselves
Wow.
to bring in money, because our children were getting bigger and they had more needs and we wanted more for them. And yeah, it was quite an intense journey bringing up the boys, and so we wanted more for them. And we used to do ayahuasca ceremonies here, and in the morning of one of these, I had a real vision that we were going to start to we were going to start to offer communities. And at the
Mhm.
time, we were really into raw food and yoga and breathing practices and Kundalini yoga and these kind of sharings. And so we started to do small retreats
Mm.
around that. And then we brought in a really great, really fantastic retreat that my friend runs, which is an aerial camp. And so she would teach people to do trapeze and hoop and rope work, which
Wow.
is absolutely brilliant. That was one of the first ones. But around this time, we got into satsang. So we started, and the satsang came to our area, and we were really impressed by it. And we used to go to 2 satsangs a day, so it was about 4 hours in meditation a day, and it became clearer and clearer that we felt that this is where a lot of the healing could be done through. Satsang translates to meetings in truth.
Mm.
So we offered our first retreat out to a woman called Aisha Salem, and she was phenomenal.
Mm.
And she did a retreat here for 3 weeks, and it had about 40 people, and I did all the cleaning, all the cooking, everything in that time. And that was the start of things.
That's
And
kind
it
of
just
amazing because if you look at that story, I mean, your story is one of almost like following flow. It's like it's not all that different. This topic comes off over and over again
Mm.
on our calls and on our discussion. Is that, and it's really the way I live, and it's confusing for other people because they're so focused on the goal that they lose that the process of getting there is actually the joy of life. Like you get to enjoy the journey, like not impose it and fight for it and struggle, and then like not enjoy every minute. And when I hear you speak, it's like I bought land because I wanted to buy land. I built a house on that because I wanted to buy. It's like as if you did what you love doing every moment. And then in the end, you got all this stuff, but not because almost you were forcing yourself in any direction. You got it because you just invited everything to continue reinforcing what you were loving.
And it's definitely a paradise out
felt
there.
like a very
Yes.
much it felt like a very natural unfolding of events.
I hear
And
it.
I remember Rupert saying that it really has its own, like it basically has its own direction. Hidden Paradise
Mm.
creates itself, really. It
Mm.
has its
Yeah.
own consciousness in its way, and in that we're just like the tools. We're like
Yeah.
the slaves to what needs to be.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because I don't know if I'd maybe, and I have actually said that live now.
I was going to
But
say, I wanted you to say the word caretaker because slave would
yeah,
imply that
caretaker.
actually you have no choice, where in some ways
And
you are the
that
caretaker.
it's just a notion. It's just a notion, and I feel very privileged to
Yeah.
have a notion like that. And so I just, yeah, I, I have been, I feel very privileged to be in this position
Yeah,
as a caretaker of this amazing project. And
yeah.
I just say something about the name Hidden Paradise is when we came up with the name together, we were writing all sorts of things down, and some of the names were absolutely brilliant. But I said, there's on the corner, on the crossroads below us, it says Paraíso Escondido and Cania, the village. And I thought, hey, let's call ourselves Hidden Paradise because look, we've already got a signpost, and also the name's a great name. And we had a little interview with someone, and he said, and does the name actually refer to the hidden paradise within? And I thought,
Mm,
wow, wow, wow.
mm.
That is incredible because it hadn't even, sometimes the magic comes and you don't even know.
Yeah.
You don't even know
You don't
where
see the
it's coming
change.
from
You
till
don't see the
later.
genius
But
in it at the moment, and then it just becomes more and more. Yeah,
yeah,
I love it. It's our wonderful chaos. Basically, someone just came on our show and said, being with you guys is like living in a wonderful chaos. And then we said, oh, we got the name of the show.
Yeah.
It was
it's a
yeah.
great name.
Natalie is
The
our
wonderful chaos.
yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's
So we're coming
yeah.
to an end now, aren't we?
We've got 4 minutes, just to make clear to every viewer. So Ronnie and I have traveled really the world, thinking where do we want to spend more time when we're not in Amsterdam, and there's in all of those travels, there's only one place where immediately we agreed on it and acted on it. Was basically when we came to visit you, and there was a plot that was nearby that was a little bit complicated. We don't need to go into that story, obviously, but we immediately looked at each other and said, "This is it." Like this is it, and till that point and since that point, there's never been a spot where we've said this is it. So
Wow.
that's an incredible testament to like the location and the beauty and the wonder and the fact that you're there. You don't in the article I wrote for you, which I encourage everyone to read. It's a really wonderful article.
It is.
It'll be on, I'm guessing, by the time most people see this video on Buzzworthy. So go to Buzzworthy, search. I think it was Living in Community for 30 years. I don't know exactly the title. I think that might have been the title. But the thing was that there's very few places in my life where I wasn't able to like say this is what this place is in a minute. Like that's it. I got this place. Like I see hippies, and I think in the article you're like Andy, please be more generous to the people here, where it was an honest feeling like, are these people homeless or do they live here, right? Because and you explained to me that basically everyone, even the very wealthy people, are wearing the same clothes as the people that are actually living in the communities. So in some weird way, you've got this very condensed area where people are very free and comfortable. Everyone's interacting. There's no hierarchy. We're all sort of just being in community. So although you're in the community in the canyon, you also have this bigger one, which is the city itself, which sort of is in some ways embraced. Of course, there's going to be people that say, get the British people out of here, obviously. But there's so many Japanese groups and everything else. I found it very, very fascinating. So
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a transition town, or we're working towards being a transition town.
Yeah.
So we have our own seed bank, and there's a conscious community here, and plenty of places for people to celebrate together. And yeah, it's a beautiful place to live.
So we're looking forward.
Interesting in the lockdown, I tell you.
It must be. I mean, in a strange way, yes, the lockdown isn't all that much different than a non-lockdown, and except maybe when you go into town, I've heard that they're pretty stringent now about who can go out of their houses and that kind of thing there.
Well, also, I don't think you're hosting retreats right now, right?
No, we're not hosting retreats at the moment. But I noticed that Static Awakening have put in their promo for this year, which is very exciting. Yeah. So hopefully that happens.
Ecstatic Awakening, 1.5 meters apart from one another.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure that won't be the case for that.
I mean, that was the retreat that I met you, Julia.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're coming up on the hour right now. Thank you very much.
Just say something. So for Hidden Paradise, guys, go to the Facebook page, and when COVID is getting a little bit more when the regulations are getting less
Mm.
strict, Julia would definitely be having a lot of retreats there. And like, I don't know what you'll be hosting, like from dancing to meditations to
Yeah.
tantra.
Yeah.
Like it's great. It's just and she's a great cook.
Yeah. I mean, all organic. I mean, and the real thing, and this is, I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable with me saying it, but I'm going to say that, like, the price per head, I've never seen a place or community where you do it at the price you do it. So by the time I finish saying this, you might have to increase the prices but basically, I mean, you get accommodations, board, and if you have a number of people, it has to be pretty big. You know, as far as I know, I'm going to give a number and we can say you start there, but we're talking in the range of, say, 30, 35 euros a person. Is that right? Is that in the ballpark? If you have 50 people at a retreat that they can stay,
I
sleep,
think it's
and
now
have.
60.
It's now 60. Great. Okay.
High
I'm
five.
happy. Thank you. That's what it always should have been. So it's 60, which still is a steal for me, by the way. 60 euros, you get room, board, and you get all facilities, two swimming pools. Imagine that. Like $60 a head for all your food and accommodations in an incredible location. It's mind blowing.
And you're walking on these little footpaths. You can pick berries,
Yes.
there's apples. It's just
we can't
crazy.
plug it enough, but we're gonna say goodbye to you now, and like give you a hug, because I am just grateful that you gave us your time today, and I know you were wondering if we could keep an hour of interest, and it was more than interesting.
We're gonna see you soon, Julie.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Bye. And I can't wait to be living next to you. So that intention.
Yeah, it's going to happen, isn't it?
It is. The as you said, both of us live very similarly. We're going to let it unfold. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. This lockdown's been amazing for thinking about, you know.
Yeah. Well,
things.
only thing Ronnie and I keep thinking about is when can we get there. So we say goodbye to
Got
you.
lost for words. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Wow, that's beautiful. As expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to spend a week with Jules shooting a food book for her. Bambos did the photography. It was really beautiful. And
I'm like, hey, Andy, join me.
And he said, join me. And I thought, randomly, yeah, why not? Ronnie was looking at me like, you're going on vacation with somebody else? Yeah, I'm going with Bambos.
It was great.
It was great. It was really good.
Andy was actually doing the styling.
Yeah, I was a food stylist for a week. I loved it. And I looked at the pictures. I'm really proud of that work.
Yeah.
If I look back, I'm like, yeah, I actually am proud of that. I learned a lot from a food photographer who I'd like to also have on the show at some point. I think that would be great to have him. So thank you for joining us on another episode of A Wonderful Chaos. It was absolutely great to have you here. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode, which will actually be tomorrow. We'll have... Oh my God, tomorrow is Thursday, Bambos.
Donatella
Fergazzi. We have our drag queen. The queen of drag is on tomorrow. The queen of drag. Bambos will be dressed up. He'll be in the makeup. And we've got it going on A Wonderful Chaos. We look forward to seeing you then. Yeah. Bye-bye.